Hey folks, Steve here. This video is going to be in the hobby commentary category, so if you're on the channel looking for gameplay videos, unboxings, and all that other good stuff, there are plenty other videos to watch. But this video in particular is uh, regarding, I guess, some posts that have happened recently, and it has to do with a little bit of drama. And when I do videos like these, my intention is always to try to include some level of, I don't know, rational discourse to what's going on elsewhere. Whether or not I succeed in that is an entirely different thing, but I wanted to speak to something that I've thought about a lot in the past, which is, what's the nature of lighter war games and easier to play war games? What's that relationship to the more complex stuff that I've played and that I like when I can, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I had run across this this blog post on Board Game Geek titled "Undaunted versus Daunted: Health of the Hobby versus Go Fuck Yourself." Yeah, we're going there, and and yeah, I'm just gonna say the word here, right? If someone's gonna say it, then I'll say it here in the context of the discussion. So basically, Bruce, this person, Bruce has his Wild Weasel podcast. Carl here was posting a blog post on sort of the same topic, but what really is kind of the heart of why I'm making a video here is just so this podcast episode, it was there's a whole episode here of other stuff. I'll just say that there's a lot of other stuff, but at a certain point, at like the 42 mark, Bruce, the host of this podcast, goes into a response to a YouTuber named Marco. Marco does he's prolific. He has a lot of videos. I think he does a pretty good job of talking to games and providing his thoughts on them. And he's somebody I've watched for a long time before I started this channel. Bruce kind of digs in at Marco for reviewing a game called Undaunted Normandy. And I am not familiar with Undaunted Normandy very well. I looked at the game page and was looking at it a little bit just to kind of see what they were talking about. But Marco kind of discussed a lot of things related to that game as saying, I really like and appreciate that Undaunted is a lighter game and has mechanics that are much easier to play, and Marco put some additional opinion on it to say, like, these are good games, and for him, it's important for the hobby, and that, he's getting older, he doesn't like playing a lot of complicated stuff, he doesn't have the time to do it, and so, he ultimately, it sees this as a good thing for the hobby, because for the health of the hobby, there has to be a way for people to come into the hobby, an entryway into the hobby, so that there's a community here, because there's, I'm not saying anything controversial here, there's a fear that, the hobby is so niche, and there's a lot of older folks in it that, what is this hobby going to look like down the road? And of course, I'm kind of a younger guy, and I want this hobby to be in existence and the community to be there until I'm gone and beyond. So I care if the hobby is healthy and able to sustain itself. And what was really bizarre is that Bruce really dug at Marco, and he said, and this is like the response, "Go fuck yourself," which okay, sometimes you got to tell someone to go fuck themselves, but I really don't understand where Bruce is coming from in this, and I think Bruce is coming at it from a very emotional place. That he became somehow offended by Marco's comments and accused Marco of making statements about the entire hobby, but that's what everyone does all the time, because we all have opinions and we say them. But apparently Marco's opinion offended Bruce to a severe degree that he had to say, go fuck yourself, as his generalized response. Now, Bruce, to his credit, did go into some detail around, and I don't have anything to show because it's audio, so you can go listen to it if you'd like. You can go, wargamespace.com, find the episode, and take a listen. And he's got his listeners who are agreeing or, I don't know, jumping on the bandwagon of being upset about what somebody else said, which I don't get. Not holding back your punches is exactly what was needed. Okay, about what though? What's the problem here? Somebody likes lighter war games, and other people like more hardcore, complex hex and counter traditional war games. Is that the issue here? Now there are, in Carl Fung's blog post here, he actually takes the time to go through and criticize the game Undaunted Normandy on more logical and legitimate grounds about historicity and things like that, which is a much, it's an interesting read, and I would say, go check it out, and you could compare to what, Marco's saying in his video about the game, and walk away from it and say, well, there's some things about Undaunted that may not be great for history or might not be good from a design standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of different opinions you could have, but I think what really bothered me was this attitude that this whole topic is a zero-sum game, and I actually did comment about this in the I posted my own comment because I had to share my thoughts on it, and I'm sharing it here too, which is, why it's not a zero-sum game, guys, right? I mean, there are badly designed games, there are games that have bad history or are not very historical. In both games that are lighter and less complex, and in games that are more complex. That happens regardless of the type of game you're talking about. And I hate to break it to folks, but you got to understand, like World in Flames, for instance. I love World in Flames. That's a tough sell to people. Okay, and even if they like history, convincing them to play a game with 5,000 individual half-inch counters or whatever they are, quarter-inch counters, or not quarter-inch, I'm sorry, half-inch counters, that's a tough sell. And honestly, if it weren't for lighter games, if it weren't for games that are probably in the same bucket as Undaunted, a lot of people might not even be playing war games right now. And a really great example of stuff that is considered lighter or watered down and not very historical is stuff like Axis and Allies. I mean, without Axis and Allies, I wouldn't be here talking about games right now. I mean, I played that, and that was cool, but I wanted more historical things. I wanted more complex mechanics, right? And so I got into more war games. I discovered GMT, and all these other games existed. And I play World in Flames, and I love World in Flames. But I couldn't have gotten there without these games that... gosh, it could have been a deck-building game about commanding American or German forces, and that game might have been not very historical. It might have had simpler mechanics that aren't really great for simulation, but they at least were a gateway, an entryway into the hobby so that I could find the stuff that I really wanted to find. And I say this as somebody who has attended conventions, who has gone out of his way to talk to people about wargaming and have gotten more people into wargaming. But I wasn't doing that by slapping World in Flames in front of them. I was doing that by saying, here, try this card-driven wargame. It's a lot of fun. Here, play this, lighter game, and it plays in a couple hours, and that kind of piques their interest. Here, play a coin game, and that kind of gets them interested in the way that history can be explored via board games. So this whole thing with Bruce telling Marco to go fuck himself, I mean, to me that just speaks to the ignorance of some folks in the hobby, maybe, is what it is. I mean, I don't know how else to approach it, that there's room for both. I mean, this is not a zero-sum game, and no matter what, gosh, I mean, there's somebody in here who wants to bring in intergenerational culture war stuff into it, and that's not what this is. It's a question of, do you like playing lighter games? Do you like playing complicated games? You can do both, and the hobby has room for both. And the reality is, you're much more likely to get new people into the hobby with lighter games. That's sort of like life on easy mode. You get somebody started with some easy stuff, and just like you're not playing a heavy metal guitar solo. When you start to learn guitar, you play chords. You learn the A chord and the D chord and the E chord. You can play like one song or a handful of songs with those chords, and then you learn, bar chords, and then you learn, for a lot of people, that's how they approach it. And the one thing that was really ridiculous to me in Bruce's assessment was that he brought up an example of a experienced Hexen War gamer teaching his 60-year-old or 70-year-old father how to play some complicated game or something, or some game, right? And that they didn't have any problem doing that, and that worked just fine. And he juxtaposed that example to Marco talking about a time in which he taught his daughters how to play some other game that was a lighter game or whatever. And to try to make that comparison and say that it's the same or it's just as good or they're in the same field is ridiculous, because I don't know. I'm a father, and let me tell you, it's different. It's just different. It's different than going to a good friend of mine who's in his mid to late 50s and saying, "Hey, come play World in Flames with us," and him learning that game and trying to work it out. That's a whole different thing than trying to teach, one of my nephews how to play even commands and colors. It is very different, right? It's just a very different kind of thing, and that your audience is what matters. It's your audience. So if you want younger people, kids, to learn to play war games, by default you're probably going to teach them something that is a little more attractive to them for some reason, right? The hook. I don't know what you want to call it, a hook to spark their interest, and then if they like that game, you show them other games, right? You play Memoir 44, you play some other game, and you get them to say, "Oh, this is pretty fun." You can go, "Okay, now we're going to play this game, and it's more complicated, but it does more things to history." And if they really like history or they really like game mechanics, they're going to latch onto that. Because I say this as somebody who has spent hours creating educational how to play videos for complex war games. I want to make it as easy as possible to learn big, complicated war games. I endeavor to do that for people. And even with what I'm doing with the Dark Valley, which is here's me playing the Dark Valley so that you can see a true example of play the whole way through to help you play this game that is kind of complicated, right? It is up to some of us to be able to do that for people and who choose to do that. I chose to do that. I want more people to play World in Flames. So I want to make that easy. I want to make those introductory videos, those educational videos, so that people are helped out. Because I know that, without those things, you're not going to get people willing to jump in and play a 5,000 counter war game. That's a hard sell, right? So what's bothering me a little bit about the situation is just the amount of emotion I'm seeing from people and seeing that there's something wrong that Marco said. And I very much disagree. I mean, I think Marco's coming at it from a certain perspective. I think these other folks are coming at it from another perspective. But the reality is, there's room enough for everybody, right? I mean, if you want to teach your cousin how to play OCS, you might very well be very successful in doing that. But then you might not, and that's not a reason to give up teaching them stuff. If I look at, and we're just going to pop over to my collection real quick, I have games of a variety of complexity, right? I have hex and counter games. I have card-driven games. I have games that aren't quite war games, but are interesting ways to get people into the hobby. So 1960, Making of the President, for instance, is a great, fun game. It's not necessarily a war game, but it's a game I would use as a way to get someone to try Twilight Struggle. And then if they like Twilight Struggle, then I might shift them to try to play Washington's War. And if they like Washington's War, then I might try a little bit more complex of a CDG, and then I might then push and say, why don't you play this hex encounter game with me too, and see how that goes. Um, that to me is like a natural progression of keeping the hobby healthy, is introducing folks um, to greater increments of complexity and historical fidelity that they can handle. But everyone's different, right? If you're going to meet somebody and says, "Yeah, sign me up for Imperium Romanum, I'm ready to rock and roll," hey, then great. You don't have to play the lighter stuff in between. But the harsh reality of the situation is that there are people who like history. That's a niche. There's people who like board games. That's a broader niche. Maybe not even a niche. It's just a thing. But you need a combination of all those things to get to what is someone going to be a war gamer or like war games. We kind of have to acknowledge that, and work out how to get folks involved and brought in. And if somebody's saying like, man, I really don't want to sit here and try to play through World in Flames, and I like games that are lighter, like maybe with Blitz, a World in Conflict. Um, that's not trying to tell people they're having bad fun, and I really don't think that's what Marco's intention was in his comments. But I think Bruce, in particular, became overreactive to that and upset about someone else having an opinion about things. So, I mean, the reality is there's going to be people always, I hope, who are interested in playing stuff like OCS and World in Flames and uh, if I'm looking at my collection, Great Battles of History, and want to play Caesar, Conquest of Gaul. Those people, I hope, will always exist because I love those games. I don't want to not be the only person playing them at some point. But that there has to be room and there has to be acknowledgement that games like Here I Stand is a bit different than your typical Hex Encounter war game. There has to be room for games like Coin, Liberty or Death is a good one to introduce people to. Things like Labyrinth. I mean, all of these other games, they have, if you want to look at it like utility or value, they have utility and value to the hobby. So this concern, and you can say, I mean, I got a lot of variety of different types of things. Even Carl's blog post, I think, is, he ends this blog post on this idea that history can be taught in many ways. Please don't water it down because, in this case, Undaunted has some historical issues, in his opinion, or in his analysis, I should say. I mean, I agree with that. But when we say water it down, I mean, watered down has a lot of meanings, right? And at some point, it having a game that is theoretically watered down is not meaning that games that aren't watered down disappear or don't matter, or the people playing those games are dumb, stupid people who are lame. Like that. That's not how any of this really works. And I'm just surprised at the number of people who are speaking up about this and being, I guess, offended by that are just bothered by this. Like a game is published that is not super historical, and the world goes crazy. It's bizarre. It's bizarre to me. So I hope, like, if you're watching this, right, you might disagree with what I'm saying. That's okay. We have disagreements. Everyone in the world does. I get it. We have differences of opinion, and I guess when it comes to like this very specific topic that I just happen to come across, to me, the rational thing is to accept that there are games of all stripes that are badly designed and good designed, well designed, I should say. There are games that are not very historical. They make the attempt, right? It's not a fantasy game. They attempted to be historical or to be themed in a historical sense, but fail in both cases, right? For complex games that somehow just missed the mark, they screwed it up somehow, or the maps are all goofy, or where that happens in complex games. People don't no one in the comments should say they've never come across a complex game that didn't have something wrong with it, right? Some of those games do exist, right? They have existed. It's not some unique thing for a light game like Undaunted to have history issues or historical issues. That it is across the board, and it's not a matter about watering it down. And games have different use cases and different purposes. So whatever Undaunted Normandy is, again, I'm not exactly well versed in it, and it looks, a bit of a, I don't know, almost like a tactical game. It appears to some degree, and you're controlling squads of guys. I mean, okay. Maybe you get some stuff wrong. Some of the pictures aren't accurate. One guy complained that there's like some unit is represented as having too many black guys or something like that, or that there's a African American soldier where he's not supposed to be, even though, I mean, I'm not sure why to be so bothered about that. The game has just a very different feel than, I don't know, a hex and counter game in general. So, but the real question is, right? Is it worth saying to somebody, go fuck yourself, for thinking that this game might be a good game for the hobby because it might attract more people to the hobby? If that's your position, then go fuck yourself. I don't know. It's funny to look at this, and I have games that are not far from this that I might use to try to say, hey, look, this game's fun, isn't it? Let's try some other stuff. And we need that. I mean, I'm sorry, but we do. It's important, guys. I want to keep making videos and be a part of the hobby for as long as I can manage. And I want to bring in as many people into the hobby as I can to enjoy these great games that are designed by people who really do care about history and want to make that leap for fidelity. So, I don't know. That's just some commentary, guys. It's rambling opinions, as they are, from all over the internet. You don't have to go far to find them. Yeah. So that'll do it for this video. I do apologize for my lapse in Dark Valley stuff. I've over the holidays I had family visit and work's been busy, and I haven't had a chance to do anything with the Dark Valley recordings. I did get my package from GMT today that includes a traditional hex and counter war game and a game that's a little bit different and is a little bit non-conventional from a war game sense, but might be a game more attractive to people who aren't used to wargaming. How about that? Room in the same package from GMT for both of those games in the hobby. Isn't that interesting? So I'll be doing some unboxing videos of that very shortly, and they will be up on the channel later today as well. If not, maybe even before this one, we'll see. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope I'm not ruffling too many feathers, but, at the end of the day, I wish to inject rationality as best I can. And we're all here to have fun and play games and love history, right? That's what brings us together. And hopefully we're not tearing ourselves apart for stupid things. That's my hope. So, catch you later, guys.